On the Greek battlefield, a 2-meter-tall muscular hunk stepped out of the formation, relying on his strong physique. He kept hurling provocations in front of the enemy formation. Little did he know, he would pay the price for his arrogance in the next second. At this moment, a warrior from the opposing side began charging toward the hunk. The warrior's agile moves successfully dodged the hunk's 2 attacks. As he closed in on the hunk, he struck a precise blow with his sword, piercing the hunk's vital spot. This fatal strike brought the hunk crashing to the ground, dead. After defeating the enemy's strongest warrior, the warrior confidently shouted a challenge in front of the enemy formation. "Is there no one else who can fight?" Seeing no one dared to respond, the opposing king had to admit defeat. He offered the sword symbolizing the warrior king, but the proud man paid no attention and turned to leave directly. It turned out this brave man was Achilles, recognized as the strongest warrior in Greece. For years, King Agamemnon of Mycenae, with his powerful military and Achilles' help, had conquered all city-states in Greece, using force to threaten all city-state kings into submitting to him. But Achilles did not fight for King Agamemnon. He fought to prove he was Greece's greatest warrior, hoping to be remembered in history forever. That night, King Agamemnon's younger brother, Menelaus, hosted a feast for guests who had crossed the sea. They were the 2 princes of Troy. After years of negotiations, Troy and Sparta finally reached an agreement, becoming friendly allies. However, during the feast, the young Prince Paris locked eyes with King Menelaus' wife. While King Menelaus was indulging in pleasures, the young prince sneaked into the queen's chamber. Later, the 2 shared a night that needs no elaboration. The next day, as the princes sailed back to Troy, the young prince secretly led his brother to the cabin and had the woman hiding inside come out. It turned out the young prince had not only cuckolded King Menelaus but also secretly taken his wife away. When Hector learned of this, he was shocked and immediately ordered the ships to turn back to Sparta, for he knew full well the consequences of taking the queen without permission. But at the young prince's pleadings, he had to turn a blind eye, for once the arrow was shot, there was no turning back. Even if they returned the queen to Sparta, they would never let the young prince off the hook. And so, the 2 set sail for Troy, taking Sparta's queen with them. In Sparta, when Menelaus learned his wife had been abducted, he flew into a rage. He immediately went to Mycenae and told his elder brother Agamemnon what had happened. This played right into Agamemnon's hands. He had long wanted to conquer Troy and take it for himself. Unfortunately, the other lords had refused to send troops, citing the long distance. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now, all of Greece believed the young prince of Troy had humiliated them. The next day, Agamemnon led 50,000 elite soldiers aboard his warships and set sail. In Troy, the people lined the streets, showering flowers to welcome the young prince, who had brought back the most beautiful woman in Greece. When the prince returned to the palace, Troy's old king doted on his youngest son excessively. Even knowing this absurd act could lead to the kingdom's destruction, he tacitly approved of it. A few days later, Agamemnon's fleet crossed the Aegean Sea and reached Troy's bay. Hundreds of warships raced toward the shore, but just then, Agamemnon noticed a black warship suddenly appear ahead of his fleet. A sharp-eyed subordinate told him the leader on that ship was Achilles. It turned out Achilles planned to capture Troy's coast alone, proving to the entire Greek army that he not only had superb martial skills but was also the greatest commander in history. Before the battle, Achilles gave an impassioned speech to boost morale. Meanwhile, Troy's warriors were ready for defense. They planted spikes all along the coast, and archers lit their arrowheads, poised to strike. As the first Greek warship hit the shore, the battle was imminent. Troy's archers began their attack, sending a dense shower of arrows raining down on the warriors. Warriors who couldn't dodge fell, struck by arrows. Under the deputy commander's orders, the warriors quickly jumped off the ships and charged toward the high ground. But unexpectedly, the enemy sent more archers. Seeing this, Achilles immediately ordered his men to form a formation. Soon, these well-trained soldiers used their shields to form a defensive wall. They held their shields high, moving forward step by step. When they neared the enemy's defense line, the warriors scattered quickly and launched an attack. In the face of these valiant Greek warriors, Troy's fragile archers stood no chance in close combat. With just 50 men, Achilles easily broke through the enemy's first line of defense. This boosted the morale of the Greek army in the rear. However, this displeased King Agamemnon greatly. If Achilles monopolized the credit, he would be humiliated in front of the other lords, and Achilles' prestige would even surpass his own. So he sent a strong commander racing toward the shore. This man was over 4 meters tall, immensely strong, swinging a sledgehammer that took down one enemy after another. At this time, Troy's eldest prince led his cavalry to the bay in a hurry. Seeing Achilles was about to storm the Temple of the Sun, he immediately ordered his men to reinforce it. For centuries, the people of Troy had worshipped Apollo, the sun god. If the temple was destroyed, Troy's army morale would plummet. At that moment, Achilles charged straight toward the temple alone. Dozens of guards rushed to attack him, but Achilles' skills were so exceptional that these well-equipped guards stood no chance. With just a single dagger, Achilles killed them all. Achilles not only disregarded the sun god but also urged his soldiers to plunder the temple. Staring at the statue of Apollo in front of the temple, Achilles ignored his deputies' pleas and chopped off the head of Apollo's statue with one swing of his sword. But just then, Hector arrived with his cavalry, yet Achilles remained unflustered. He took a spear from his deputy, gathered his strength, and hurled it fiercely. The spear shot forward at an astonishing speed, striking the enemy's deputy commander with precision. Hector was shocked, enraged. He threw a spear at Achilles, but Achilles dodged it easily with a sideways move. Then Achilles slipped into the temple, and Hector led his soldiers in pursuit. Little did they know they had fallen into Achilles' trap. These professionally trained Greek warriors were ruthless. They not only looted all the valuables in the temple but also killed the unarmed old priest. Hector rebuked Achilles, saying killing these defenseless civilians for the sake of eternal fame was not worth it. Hector then chased Achilles out of the temple, wanting to end the war early with a duel, but Achilles had come for eternal fame. He wanted to defeat Hector openly in front of the entire Greek army, so he turned Hector away. After achieving victory, Achilles climbed to the temple's highest point, raised his sword toward the distance, and savored the moment of glory. When Achilles returned to the camp, he found his men had brought in a female captive. One whiff of her hair told Achilles she was of royal blood. It turned out this woman was the niece of Troy's king. Gazing at the princess's beautiful face, Achilles couldn't help but feel a stir. But just then, a subordinate walked in, saying King Agamemnon wanted to see him. When Achilles arrived at the king's camp, ministers were vying to present family heirlooms to celebrate the king's success in seizing the beachhead. King Agamemnon promised them that once Troy was captured the next day, he would take them on a tour of the city. Agamemnon told the group to leave. He knew why Achilles had come. He wanted to be remembered in history. But Agamemnon had no intention of letting that happen. He declared that today's victory belonged to the king. After capturing Troy, he would erect stone monuments on all Greek islands, carving his own great deeds into them. Agamemnon would be the one remembered forever. He then had his men bring in his spoils of war, and to Achilles' fury, the spoils included the woman from his camp. Achilles drew his sword in anger, ready to fight, but in this tense standoff, the female captive stepped forward. She begged them to stop, saying too many had died that day. She didn't want anyone to die for her. Achilles was left speechless by the words of the woman he admired. He put down his sword and spat out harsh words to the king. "I will look down at your corpse and smile." Achilles then returned to his camp and ordered his men to stay on the beach, forbidding them from joining the attack on Troy. In Troy, ministers accused Prince Paris of bringing a devastating war upon Troy out of his own desires by taking King Menelaus' wife. But the old king doted on his youngest son deeply. To get him out of trouble, he calmly told the ministers that Troy's walls were 100 meters high and impenetrable. Moreover, they had the best archers in the world and the brave eldest prince Hector. They would defeat the Greeks and win a great victory in tomorrow's battle. But just then, Prince Paris stood up, saying he would take responsibility for his actions and didn't want Trojans to die for him in vain. He planned to resolve the war with a duel. That night, the old king took out the family's ancestral sword and gave it to Paris, who had never been on a battlefield. He hoped the sword, symbolizing Troy's soul, would help his youngest son win the duel. The next day, the king deployed thousands of soldiers outside Troy's walls, forming a formation to await the Greek army. Soon, Agamemnon led 50,000 Greek soldiers to Troy. The Trojans, who had never seen such a massive army, were stunned. Even the old king stood frozen. When the Greek army reached the front, Prince Paris challenged Menelaus to a one-on-one duel to settle the war. But Agamemnon, relying on his numerical superiority, refused. He demanded not only the return of the queen to his brother but also that Troy's king submit to him. Faced with such demands, the eldest prince Hector would not agree. He said that the people of Troy would never submit to a foreign ruler. However, just as Agamemnon turned back to prepare for battle, his younger brother Menelaus stepped forward. Looking at the young prince who had never been on a battlefield, Menelaus confidently threw away his shield, grabbed his heavy sword, and launched an attack. Facing the battle-hardened Menelaus, the young prince cowered like a turtle, daring not to show his head at all. Enraged by this, Menelaus kicked him to the ground, which made Agamemnon on the side burst into laughter. Then the young prince picked up his equipment and took the initiative to attack, but he was defeated within 2 rounds. Menelaus snatched the shield with one hand and threw it aside, then knocked the young prince's weapon to the ground. Just as Menelaus raised his long sword, ready to chop off the young prince's head, the latter resorted to a cheap trick and turned to run. He clung tightly to his brother Hector's thigh. Trembling with fear, the young prince dared not face this life-and-death duel. At this moment, Hector told Menelaus that the battle was over, but Menelaus refused to agree. He swung his sword at the young prince, but unexpectedly, Hector pierced Menelaus' abdomen with a single sword strike. Agamemnon saw that the Trojans not only played dirty but also killed his brother. He was instantly furious and immediately ordered his 50,000-strong army to attack the city of Troy. The 50,000 Greek soldiers, holding shields and swords, charged frantically at the enemy's shield formation. After the Trojan soldiers withstood the Greek army's charge, Hector immediately ordered the archers on the city walls to fire. Dense volleys of arrows rained down from the sky. Greek soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were hit by arrows and fell to the ground one after another. The human wave tactics launched by Agamemnon were completely ineffective. The soldiers fell dead before they could even rush to the walls of Troy. Achilles, standing in the distance, was even more anxious, seeing that the Greek army's formation was in disarray. Hector ordered his soldiers to advance, but at this moment, an 8-foot-tall Greek general blocked the soldiers' advance. He swung his sledgehammer, killing one person with each blow. Hector immediately rode his horse towards the strong man, but unexpectedly, he was knocked off his horse, falling head over heels. Then the strong man raised his sledgehammer and struck fiercely. Hector nimbly dodged, but the next second, he was grabbed by the strong man. In a critical moment, Hector broke free with a headbutt. The enraged strong man raised his sledgehammer and smashed at Hector. Fortunately, a shield nearby blocked the strong man's heavy blow. Hector casually picked up a spear and stabbed at him. However, the robust strong man didn't die immediately. He suddenly broke the spear and then punched Hector hard, knocking him down, but Hector took the opportunity to pick up the weapon on the ground and stabbed the strong man's abdomen with a fierce blow. The strong man struggled for a while and finally fell to the ground. Under Hector's command, the shield soldiers of Troy began to advance. At this time, the Greek army, having lost their general, saw their morale plummet and were routed by the Trojan soldiers. The reckless King Agamemnon finally realized that the situation was lost and had to choose to retreat temporarily. In this battle, not only did Agamemnon lose his brother, but he also lost 8,000 Greek soldiers. The morale of the Greek coalition forces, with troops dispatched by various lords, was collapsing, and some even wanted to return home. To reverse the situation, Agamemnon had to swallow his pride. He returned the captured priestess to Achilles, hoping that he would come back to command the Greek army. On the other side, in the city of Troy, after discussions between the Trojan king and his ministers, they planned to pursue the victory. That night, they launched a surprise attack, firing tens of thousands of fire arrows at the Greek garrison. After luring a large number of enemy soldiers forward, the Trojan soldiers rolled down several stone balls filled with fuel. When the stone balls came into contact with the flames on the ground, they immediately turned into huge fireballs and rushed rapidly towards the Greek army. After a night of fireball attacks, the first line of defense of the Greek army was completely destroyed. The Trojan soldiers began to advance towards the seaside, but at this moment, a Greek warrior suddenly rushed out of the crowd, which instantly boosted the morale of the Greek army. They cheered Achilles' name. At Achilles' command, the Greek army launched a counterattack. At this time, with the assistance of his teammates, Achilles charged all the way towards Hector. The leaders of the two armies began a life-and-death duel. However, Achilles was not in form at all and was beaten back repeatedly by Hector. Finally, Achilles was careless, and Hector saw a loophole, directly delivering a sword strike to his throat. The strongest warrior in Greece was defeated in this way, leaving everyone in shock. But when Hector bent down to take off Achilles' helmet, he found that this person was not Achilles but his cousin. Subsequently, Hector did not order another attack. That night, Hector took his wife to a secret chamber and told her that if he died in battle and Troy fell, she should lead everyone to escape from here, because he knew very well that he had killed Achilles' cousin, and a life-and-death duel was inevitable for him. At this time, on the beach, Achilles looked sorrowful upon learning that his relative had been killed. The next day, he resolutely put on his armor, rode a chariot alone to the city of Troy, and wanted to avenge his relative through a duel. Hearing Achilles' challenge, Hector did not back down. After saying goodbye to his wife, he picked up his equipment and walked calmly out of the city gate. When the two met, Hector made an agreement with Achilles, hoping that the deceased side could have a decent funeral. But at this moment, Achilles' eyes were only filled with hatred. He confidently took off his helmet. The two strongest warriors in Greece began a life-and-death battle. Achilles chose to take the initiative to attack. Being lightly equipped, he moved quite agilely. Hector, holding a heavy shield, could only defend passively. After 2 rounds, Hector's spear was broken by Achilles with his shield. Then Hector waved his heavy shield with both hands and finally managed to gain an advantage. Achilles' spear was also broken, and the two began to fight with their swords. But short sword duels focused more on speed. Because of his heavy shield, Hector couldn't keep up with the demigod Achilles in speed. Achilles' movements were smooth and flowing, and his strength was even greater. A forward stab sent Hector reeling several meters back. His wife on the city wall watched in fear. Then Hector mustered up his strength and charged at Achilles. Although Hector was immortal, he was the strongest warrior in Troy. After dodging several of Achilles' attacks, he landed a series of slashes and finally hit his opponent. However, this blow did not injure Achilles, leaving only a mark on his armor. Immediately after, Hector pressed his advantage and stabbed fiercely at Achilles' abdomen. At this time, the king on the city wall thought his son had won and broke into a long-awaited smile. But unexpectedly, the sword was just caught by Achilles between his waist. Hector was kicked away and unfortunately tripped over a stone, spraining his foot. The brave Hector did not choose to retreat. He picked up the broken spear on the ground, gathering his strength for a strike. But at this moment, Hector's physical strength had reached its limit, and his attacks became weak. Achilles launched a smooth series of moves, seizing the spear, then spinning around quickly twice, and stabbing the spearhead fiercely into Hector's shoulder. The severe pain made Hector kneel on the ground. Then Achilles, without a word, stabbed Hector's abdomen with a sword. The king couldn't bear to see his son fall and fainted on the spot. Hector's wife was already sobbing uncontrollably, collapsing to the ground. Subsequently, Achilles tied Hector's feet with a rope and, in full view of everyone, dragged Hector back to the camp with his chariot. However, killing Hector did not ease the anger in Achilles' heart. That night, he polished his sword alone in his tent, wanting all Trojans to pay blood for blood. But at this moment, an old man in a black robe came here, who was none other than the old king of Troy. He walked tremblingly up to Achilles, kissed his hands, and then said to him, "My son Hector died for Troy, and you have not only avenged your relative but also gained all the glory. Now I just want to take back my son's body and give him a decent funeral. Although we are enemies, enemies can still respect each other." After thinking for a moment, Achilles finally agreed to the old king's request. Achilles helped tie Hector's body to the chariot and called for the female captive. From the first moment he saw her, Achilles had fallen in love with this girl. He agreed to let the woman follow the old king back to attend her cousin's funeral and promised the old king that he would not attack Troy within 12 days. However, after 12 days, the Greek army on the beach had long since disappeared, leaving only some Greek soldiers who had died from the plague and a 10-meter-tall giant wooden horse standing on the beach. Looking at the things left by the Greeks, the young prince suggested burning it, but the old king followed the priest's advice and brought the wooden horse back to the city. But no one expected that this giant wooden horse would bring about the destruction of Troy. At the same time, by the beach, a wild dog licked a plague lesion, yet that lesion was nothing but a ruse by the Greeks. On the other side, a patrolling Trojan soldier discovered that the Greek coalition had not retreated. Instead, they were all hiding on a remote coast. He had just intended to return to report the news when he was shot down by a flurry of arrows. When night fell, the Trojan guards were all asleep, and the wooden horse suddenly opened. Inside were dozens of elite warriors, with the mighty Achilles among them. They first slaughtered all the Trojan guards, then lit torches to send signals, and immediately opened the city gates. In an instant, countless Greek warriors poured into Troy like a tide. They killed every man they saw, brutally assaulted women in the streets, and spared not even the elderly or children. In no time, Troy was drowning in blood. They soon stormed the Trojan palace. The Trojan general fought to the death but could not alter the outcome. Shortly after, King Priam of Troy was also sneak attacked from behind by Agamemnon and killed. With this, Troy fell completely. Achilles kept searching for Briseis but could not find her anywhere. Yet fate is unpredictable. Agamemnon found Briseis first. That day, he was determined to have a taste of the woman who belonged to Achilles. But in the next second, a dagger plunged into his neck. Agamemnon never imagined that he would die at the hands of a weak woman at the peak of his life. At that moment, Achilles arrived. After confirming that Briseis was unharmed, he immediately intended to take her away, but things did not go as planned. Paris appeared there as well. The moment he saw Achilles, he drew his bow and shot an arrow, guided by Apollo, the sun god. The arrow pierced Achilles' heel. Achilles was overwhelmed with pain. He rose to attack Paris but was stabbed in the chest with another sword. Thus, the mighty Achilles died at Paris' hands. Briseis fled Troy with Paris. The next day, Odysseus held a grand cremation for Achilles. The smoke rose high into the sky, visible to Briseis outside the city. She knew her lover's presence was in that smoke, then followed the group and embarked on a journey to find a new homeland. Eventually, they settled in Italy, where they thrived and gradually developed into the vast Roman Empire that spanned Europe, Asia, and Africa. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.